Hail Hydra. Two words that shook the House of Ideas to its foundation. Today we're talking about when Steve Rogers, Captain America, became an agent of Hydra, revealing that his ideals and values and the vision he represented of America was all a lie. He'd used the flag itself to blind his believers as he made the ultimate heel turn. This was an extremely controversial story in 2016, one that was met with hatred and vitriol that drew ire and anger to writer Nick Spencer and Marvel editor Tom Breevoort. At the time, they had to plead with readers to stick with the story to see if and how the landing was stuck. The story even made its way to places like Time magazine, where Spencer said, "I certainly believe it's not a gimmick. It's a story that we spent a long time on, that's compelling and captures the zeitgeist of the world. It will make readers wonder how the heck we'll get out of this." What was all this? Well, let's get into it. In 2017, Steve Rogers became an agent of Hydra, Hydra Supreme, Hydra Cap, courtesy of Red Skull and the manipulations of a sentient cosmic cube named Kobik. To tell this story, we're going to tell an omniverse-spanning story, one that transcends time and space, and one which is both deeply personal and yet requires us to break reality and explore other realities for Marvel's main 616 universe. Our first stop takes us into the galaxy to a time before time where we meet the architects of all creation, the judges of worlds. At the beginning of space and time itself, we find the First Firmament. First Firmament is the embodiment of the initial iteration of the cosmos. First Firmament is the one who created the Celestials and the Aspirants. First Firmament's ethereal being is what spread and became the multiverse itself, following a rebellion by the Celestials, a multiverse that would expand and contract into different cycles. During the first iteration of reality, the Celestials created a powerful being known as Kalhora, aka the Lost One. The Celestials, by the way, are also the ones who came to Earth and created Eternals and Deviants and eventually mutants. In the second iteration of the cosmos, Lost One created a race of beings named the Celestial Servitors, aka the Ivory Kings, also known as the Beyonders. They stole the Lost One's power, and even though time doesn't exist out there, it was forever. But when the second turned to the third and the Celestials moved into the new reality, the Beyonders stayed outside of the multiverse as well, still tapping into the vast power they'd gained from the Lost One. In fact, it was the Beyonders who made Molecule Man into a multiversal bomb that led to a multiversal implosion and collision of worlds known as incursions, which all led to the 2015 Secret Wars event when time ran out. It was Dr. Doom who became God Emperor Doom, who managed to take some of their power and create an island in the nothingness that they dubbed Battleworld. In Fantastic Four issue 319, subtitled Secret Wars 3, we learn more about Beyonders' power. One of the Beyonders, the one who toyed with heroes and villains during Secret Wars, Dr. Doom himself explains how cosmic cubes are created. When a certain force field is generated, it eventually opens a rift in reality, and energy slips through the rift to fill a field with immense power. The energy in the cube is reality-altering, matter-shaping, so when it comes through the rift, it forms and shapes itself into a perfect cube. The Beyonders imbued some cubes with sentience, which is how the Shaper of Worlds in Cubic, not to be confused with Cosmos or Kobik, came to be aware of their own existence and control their own fate. So precedents had been set for sentient cosmic cubes. Kobik, another cosmic cube who took the form of a little humanoid girl, changed the world around Earth 616, including history. Now, Steve Rogers was secretly aligned with Hydra all the way back in World War II when he was battling Axis powers and the Red Skull. This was the focal point of public discourse, with it being an affront to Captain America's Jewish creators Jack Kirby and Joe Simon. So in this new reality, a young Steve Rogers was brought up, indoctrinated, and trained by Hydra. This new reality's Hydra was founded by Sir Isaac Newton and his ancient secret society called the Brotherhood of the Shield. The Brotherhood was an earlier iteration of S.H.I.E.L.D. and was founded by Imhotep during Egypt of antiquity, which included the likes of Apocalypse and his horsemen and Moon Knight. The Brotherhood used Imhotep's spear and shield as symbols of their secret society, and it was Newton who used the spear to start Hydra. Newton also made a guy named Daniel Whitehall into the Kraken. Hydra was part of an ancient international network with overlapping protocols. Those other parts were S.H.I.E.L.D. and Leviathan. The Kraken would eventually become a member of the High Council of Hydra. Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine was secretly a member of Leviathan, which was the Soviet arm of the Wheel, but had managed to infiltrate the other arms. So then in 1926, on the Lower East Side of New York City, a young Rogers was out with his mom and abusive father when an alluring lady named Elisa Sinclair rescued the boy, scared the father off. They later came back and injured him and stole young Steve, and it was Kraken, Daniel Whitehall, along with Sinclair, aka Madam Hydra, and a doctor named Dr. Fenhoff, who raised and brainwashed the young Rogers into Hydra's ideals. About 8 years after that, Rogers tried to escape, but he was captured, and Whitehall spoke to him of his future and his destiny, and that together they could save the world. This was a stark change from Earth 616's Hydra ideals, as Machiavellian as they were. While some infiltrated the Axis powers, they sent Rogers stateside to infiltrate Project Rebirth. Earth. Then in 45, in Acuña, Japan, which was the place that Kobik made the source of Hydra's powers, and the place from which Newton used the Spear of Imhotep to give birth to Hydra, that he met with Newton, Nostradamus, and Kraken, and they told Rogers that the Allies were going to use a cosmic cube to alter reality, and he'd need to jump into the pond to save himself from rewriting. This was in secret. What the world knew was that Captain America punched Nazis and was later frozen for decades in the ice. So when this Rogers was thawed out in the modern day, he went to work realizing Hydra's plot to take over the world. Steve, Evil Steve, aka Steve-L, became an insidious threat to national security. Nay, a threat to the entire world. But in 2014, Rick Remender and Nick Klein pitted Captain America against a villain named Iron Nail, and Iron Nail was able to drain Rogers of his super soldier serum, the source of his power, and slowed aging. And then around the year 2016, the Red Skull and his daughter Sin had Kobik in their custody. Red Skull and Sin manipulated Kobik into thinking Hydra was a force for good, while his brainwashed assistant, Dr. Selvig, convinced S.H.I.E.L.D. to use Kobik to create a prison of the mind, a place called Pleasant Hill. Baron Zemo was installed as a prisoner, and he'd be the one to lead the uprising when Pleasant Hill fell. This prison was a town run by supervillains in S.H.I.E.L.D. custody, and to make it work, they brought together the shards of the cosmic cubes, and these came to be known as Kobik. Some of her fragments were part of the cosmic cube that was once owned by none other than the evil Red Skull, and so after Pleasant Hill fell, Kobik, who by now was close with Red Skull, became fixated on Hydra, and she was manipulated by Red Skull and Sin. At such a young, formative age, she was easily influenced and convinced that Hydra was a force for good. After the fall of Pleasant Hill, during which Old Man Rogers was mortally wounded by crossbones, Kobik went to give him his power back, but she instead changed his story, which was all his backstory and his being, warping reality and inadvertently creating that new timeline. Everyone thought this still to be Earth 616. What we wouldn't know for a while was that Earth 616 Steve Rogers, the original and true Captain America, was trapped in a pocket dimension, and the Rogers in the story was a new one, an evil Rogers. Hydra Cap, Steve-L, old powerless Captain America, suddenly became his younger self and full of his super soldier power once more. But who was this really behind that all-American smile? While Cap was busy with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s ongoing operations, Helmut Zemo was marching through Europe and the lawless city of Bagalia to raise an army, wanting to take control of Hydra back from Red Skull. Zemo was attacked by Cap, Free Spirit, and Jack Flag. Unannounced to the in-world story as it was in spring of 2015's Captain America Steve Rogers issue 1, where he verbalized the alliterative slogan, Hail Hydra, to readers for the first time. It was between him and Selvig. No one knew of this plot yet. No one knew that their symbol of American might and hope was on the cusp of the ultimate betrayal. Where was Jack Flag? Well, Cap pushed him out of the plane, seemingly killing him. Turned out he didn't die. He was put into a coma. We had another clue of what was coming in Cap issue 2. Red Skull was narrating the story as the camera turned to the sight of Crossbones' beating of old Steve Rogers and the appearance of the younger version in front of Bucky Barnes and Sam Wilson with the crimson and stark white letters saying Hail Hydra. In issue 3, we see Rogers secretly bending a knee to Hydra's supreme leader, Red Skull. We also see Cap's black Hydra tattoo emblazoned across his chest. We learn that after he killed Flag, he jumped out of the plane and let it crash, letting everybody believe that both Selvig and Zemo died in the process. He was supposed to kill them both. Zemo would be in prison, still alive, and Selvig would become his assistant. Red Skull and Cap were launching Hydra missions like suicide bombers on trains, so Cap could stop them and make the world believe he was successfully fighting Hydra. Speaking of pretend, Cap secretly saved Dr. Selvig despite Red Skull's order to eliminate him. Steve had hatched his own plot to, as he puts it, restore the glory of Hydra once and for all. This was Rogers' devious and treacherous scheme that he was undertaking, believing the end result to be greater than the bad it took to get there. The ends justified the means. Cap believed the world was in dire need of saving, and that he was destined to purge the world of fear, corruption, and weakness, even if he had to burn it all down to get there. That for the glory of Hydra to be restored, the castle of lies would need to implode. Peace through strength was his new doctrine. To do that, they'd have to clear Red Skull off the board. In the wake of the Hydra attacks, S.H.I.E.L.D. Commander Sharon Carter went to get a bill passed through Senate to give S.H.I.E.L.D. an immense increase in their surveillance powers. It's the NSA on steroids, one senator opined. This was around the time that Kobik went to ground and started hanging out with the Winter Soldier and his team of Thunderbolts. Captain America was instrumental in bringing Avengers, X-Men, and Inhumans together to form a unity squadron following the Avengers vs. X-Men war, which led from Ultron to a second civil war that followed the Terrigen Mist ordeal and the inhuman birth of a prescient precog named Ulysses. Their mission was to hunt down Red Skull because this was the time when Red Skull had Professor Xavier's brain in his skull. It was also to bring him in to take his place. So in Civil War, Cap discovered that Ulysses' power was flawed. They were worried he would see a future where Hydra had taken over, so Rogers halted Hydra operations. Ulysses had seen that there was a Hydra attack plot to destroy the world financial institutions, except there wasn't. Hence the flaw. What they didn't know was that the Inhumans' power was probability-based, so inherently not 100% accurate. Cap was also secretly luring the Chitauri aliens to Earth by using Chitauri queen eggs, a plan an old Soviet scientist had concocted to draw the aliens in this direction. It had happened now 4 times in 1 month, Carol Danvers said, with yet another way to whittle away at and wear down the will of the people. Hydra Cap used the Darkhold cult to murder World Security Council member Dalton, and his death is what convinced the Tribunal to remove Director Maria Hill from the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. And when Hill was ousted from S.H.I.E.L.D., she took plans for a planetary defense shield with her and turned those over to Captain Marvel, who was running Alpha Flight at the time. The Council wanted Sharon Carter to be the new director. In fact, she was the shadow interim director while Hill was under investigation, but Carter turned it down. Instead, Captain America was installed as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., just as the bill Carter brought to the floor was passed through Congress, which formally gave S.H.I.E.L.D. immense powers of surveillance and law enforcement, the exact thing that Captain America and Hydra would need. At one point, Cap went to Baron Zemo and confided in him his plan. He told him, "I'm trying to overthrow the world, trying to restore it to what it's supposed to be, and I need your help." Taskmaster got security footage of Cap saying "Hail Hydra" on the jet, and so he and Black Ant met up with Maria Hill and Bagalia to sell the footage and help her take him down. It was Elisa Sinclair, the one who kidnapped and helped raise Hydra Cap as a boy, who's now Madam Hydra, who intercepted Taskmaster and Black Ant before they could sell the video file. Madam Hydra started raising her loyal following at the same time that Zemo was rebuilding his army of supervillains. Sinclair built the new High Council of Hydra with people like Viper, Arnim Zola, Dr. Faustus, aka Fenhoff, Gorgon, Kraken, and Hive. This happened at the same time the planetary defense shield came online and went operational, though it was about to be sabotaged from within. Red Skull managed to escape and went back to his compound, where they announced that not only that he'd captured Sokovia, but it was also a nuclear power now. Rogers intercepted him and proceeded to beat him up, then tossed him out a window where the lights went out as he landed on some boulders. Rogers was now Hydra Supreme, and both Crossbones and Sin were the first to acknowledge him. Right afterwards, the new Hydra High Council met them all there. The next phase was about to begin. As Rogers assumed his new role and addressed his legions, brainwashed S.H.I.E.L.D. agents bombed the defense shield, and it fell. Hydra was about to attack just as another wave of Chitauri aliens was about to make planetfall for yet another massive intergalactic attack. Captain Marvel led an army of heroes like Blue Marvel, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Spectrum, Hyperion, Avril, aka Quasar, and flew up to near-Earth orbit to confront the horde of Chitauri invaders. An army of supervillains attacked and laid ruin to New York City at the same time, while the Hydra-controlled Sokovia nuclear threat loomed large. Cap had Iron Man and Ironheart get the defense shield back online, and when it came back online, the most powerful heroes of Earth were trapped in space. Then the Dark Force Dimension Dome was activated, isolating New York City. And then the Hydra airships and dreadnoughts filled the skies above Washington, D.C., bringing Evil Steve the ultimate power. They had Americops patrolling the streets and the Hydra soldiers fighting outside America's borders. Peace through strength, just as Hydra Cap had envisioned. This kid named Rayshon brought Tony Stark a drive that Rick Jones had given him, saying it could fix Rogers. Stark was reluctant. They tried to save him when they thought he was a clone and were brainwashed, and hundreds of people died as a result. It was like his will was broken, and fighting inevitability was a futile effort. And to make sure their will remained broken, he had Rick Jones murdered by a firing squad just as Hydra warships filled the airspace above Las Vegas and rained down death from above, rendering the city of Sin a gaping hole in the ground, even as Rogers spoke of peace and order. Despite all that, they managed to get Rick's file to the underground heroes, and Rick posthumously explained about the Cosmic Cube and what had happened to Rogers and their underlying plans to locate all the Cosmic Cube fragments that had been hidden from Rogers, including Kobik. And so a new MacGuffin subplot was born. It was then, at the unlikeliest of times, when another appeared to save a girl from the Serpent Society. The soldier was draped in ragged, torn clothing. Steve Rogers. He was alive, though still trapped in this world inside the cube. One of the fragments lay in Atlantis, which meant Captain America was on a collision course with none other than the king himself, Namor, or Namor, if you like the MCU pronunciation. In issue 3, we also see that Frank Castle, the Punisher, was Hydra, and had added Hydra tentacles to the skull emblazoned on his plate carrier. In fact, the Punisher was Rogers' red right hand, his lieutenant, and he tasked the killer with taking out the Black Widow, one of the more dangerous elements of the Resistance that was threatening Hydra's control and power. It turns out that there was another cosmic cube fragment in a secret territory in Alaska where the Hank Pym-looking Ultron was building an army of Ultron robots, something Hydra denied. But this would be where both sides were set for a collision course with each other, except that ended with Pym-Ultron sitting both sides down for a forced dinner, and then he gave the fragment to the Resistance. But Namor handed over his fragment to Rogers, so it ended up being a draw. With the world under Hydra control, the Secret Warriors, people like Daisy Johnson, aka Quake, worked to take down a brainwashed S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra from the ground while other missions and expeditions were taking place. There were other shards they chased Hydra Cap to find as well, like in Wakanda, Madripoor, Bagalia, and even Wundagore. Hydra sent their warships to the US Avengers' secret base and leveled the mountain, laying waste to everything and everyone inside. Luckily, the heroes inside were protected in their control room, but Stark identified that they must have a double agent in their midst. Someone was a CI for Hydra Cap. Who was it? Well, it was freaking Ant-Man. Why? Well, it's because Hydra had Cassie as their prisoner. Cap used a temporarily resurrected Hulk to break through to where the heroes were holed up. This led to a direct confrontation between Iron Man and Hydra Cap. Again, shades of Civil War. When he was about to kill Tony with his shield, Madam Hydra teleported him away just as a thermonuclear warhead detonated on the site. Black Widow rallied her team after that attack. Tomorrow we kill Captain America, she said. But would it be her or Miles Morales? Just like Ulysses predicted during the Second Civil War. Black Widow activated Mosaic to have him manipulate Hydra and have them turn on and kill each other while she worked to snipe Cap. Sharon Carter attempted to murder Madam Hydra and she died, which is what turned him fully to the green side, shedding his Captain America gear and donning a Hydra suit and cape. Steve had her in confinement for her deeply personal crime. Miles met Hydra Cap on the steps of the Capitol, the sight from Ulysses' vision, but in her attempt to intervene, Cap struck and killed Black Widow. Cap was starting to question everything. In the name of honor and strength, he'd now lost Bucky, Rick, Jack Flag, and now Romanoff. Sharon was alive, but jailed and seething with hatred toward him. Was that too heavy a price? In one of the world's darkest moments, a hopeless time when all was lost, it was Sam Wilson who stepped up. Captain America. Draped in his red, white, and blue, he raised his shield above his head as his partner Redwing floated on a thermal just above him. He would be the symbol of hope America needed in its darkest hour. When they had nowhere else to turn, Sam Wilson gave them hope back. He raised an army of good people to fight back. He gave them something to fight for and a future to look forward to. Speak truth to power. Fight back. It was time to assemble. And it was then that the tide turned. Doctor Strange in New York found a way to impact the Dark Force bubble, and the Guardians of the Galaxy stole a nullifier bomb from Annihilus, hoping to destroy the S.H.I.E.L.D. They did have a setback though when Sam was shot out of the sky by a Hydra-modified F-22 Raptor. And then Strange failed, and so did the space bomb, but then Avril awoke. Quasar and the Negabands were about to be brought to bear on Hydra. Sam Wilson, though shot, rose up from the sea, injured, damaged, tired, broken, but they still had fight in them. Avril shattered the S.H.I.E.L.D., and this allowed Captain Marvel to locate and then destroy the Chitauri eggs, stopping those onslaught waves. Then the dome fell and New York City was bathed in sunlight, as if to symbolize the dawn following the darkest of nights. At the same time, Kobik appeared to Steve Rogers inside his prison. The heroes of Earth rose up against Hydra. Then Hydra Cap came out of his office in Washington with a new Cosmic Cube-empowered, up-armored loadout. He was ready for war, and this was just as Kobik made Steve remember and sent him back to his home dimension. The superheroes swarmed Hydra Cap, but it wasn't enough. He used his cosmic Q powers to restore everything to Hydra's ideals. But Sam Wilson had a fragment in his hand still. It was he and Bucky who gave him the final piece. They just handed it over. The pieces made up Kobik, and so putting them together like that made her whole again. They fought and clawed their way out, and just like that, the real Steve Rogers stood before Steve-El. It was Cap v Cap. The two fought an intense battle. The real Steve, worthy as he was, picked up Thor's hammer and shattered Hydra Cap's armor, and finally took him down before returning the hammer to Jane Foster. And they did it! They won, and so the rebuilding phase could now begin. Steve-O was taken to a Shadow Pillar black site for imprisonment while the world healed and repaired from the damage he'd caused. Steve-O, numerous escape attempts like the ones involving Zemo and the Punisher and the War Machine armor, but he was recaptured after that. He would eventually get a presidential pardon by way of a POTUS controlled by the power elite, but as he was leaving the prison, the mutant witch named Selene attacked and murdered him by immolation. She resurrected him though under orders from the anti-mutant Orcus organization, and it was then that he took on the identity of Captain Krakoa. This captain became the leader of an evil group called the Mutant Liberation Front and aligned with Orcus, which was a group opposing the mutants on the island of Krakoa. Steve decided to go by his middle name, Grant, which helped to differentiate him from the original Steve. He attacked the United States Senate, hoping they'd think it was a plot by the mutants. Grant then became the newest villain to take up the mantle of Flag Smasher, and as Flag Smasher he continued to sow discord and evil around the world, like in 2025's West Coast Avengers. The team fought Flag Smasher and the Sovereign Sons on their cruise ship, which was underway in international waters. Flag Smasher escaped with their pirated weapons while the Coast Guard hunted them down. And where will they head? Well, we'll have to wait and see, which means that's a wrap on this one, my friends. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.